2024 conference previews roll on with the Big Ten Conference. It's one of the Power 2 leagues, if you want to call it that. And, of course, it is the first year without divisions, which has led to some uneven schedules, which means potentially more playoff teams. Now, the top of the conference is loaded, but the middle to the bottom of the league has picked themselves up quite a bit. Former walkovers like Rutgers and Indiana, those are not such easy outs anymore. I mean, hell, Northwestern won 8 games a year ago with an interim coach, right? Illinois has proven to be a tough out under Brett Bielema. And, of course, there is the addition of the 4 West Coast schools to pair with the typically strong core of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, etc. Now, before we get into it, you guys know what to do. Of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to the podcast because throughout the season, I'm going to be doing shows on the podcast that you're not going to be able to get over here on YouTube. And do me a favor, jump down in those comments and tell me your thoughts on these teams, who you think is going to win the conference, etc. If you'd like to keep up with my bonus content during the season, stats, projections, picks as I make them, bonus podcasts, etc., sign up at bettingcfb.com. It's $5 a month or $50 for the year. Easy peasy. Now, for each of these conference previews, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why each team might go over, 3 on why they might go under, and I'm going to give you the number of projected wins from my numbers. And I'm going to try and make this quicker because there's 18 teams in this conference, and it's week 1. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We will start off with the Illinois Fighting Illini. Current win total is 5.5. That has not moved this summer. Odds of plus 104 to go over, that's 49.02% probability, and minus 128 to go under, that is 56.14% probability. Conference odds are 200 to 1. That is about 0.5% probability. Now, for why they might go over their win total, they've got emerging playmakers, right? The junior quarterback, Luke Altmaier, he showed flashes of potential last season. And, with more experience, he could take this offense to a better level. And, of course, he's got transfer receiver Zachary Franklin coming in. Maybe he recaptures his UTSA form. You've got improved offensive line depth. Key additions like J.C. Davis at left tackle. The offensive line, probably going to be a strength. And what would you expect anything less from a Brett Bielema team? So Altmaier's going to have protection. And, I would imagine they're going to be able to create some running lanes for a pretty rejuvenated backfield. And then number 3, you got a favorable schedule. You got some tough matchups against Penn State, Oregon, Michigan is on here. You got some tough spots there, but they do benefit from having most of their winnable games at home. So getting to 6 wins, it's certainly a possibility. Certainly a possibility. Now, for why they might go under, it's a defensive rebuild, right? You're losing stars like Newton and Randolph. That leaves a significant gap on the defensive line. And, things did not exactly get better last year after Ryan Walters left. You've got an inconsistent offense. Altmaier did show flashes last year, but he had a 13-10 touchdown interception ratio. There was an issue with consistency, right? So if there's not improvement, you could have something similar to last year's 1-4 record in one-score games. And then, of course, you got tough conference games, right? You got Big Ten matchups against, again, I mentioned Michigan, Penn State, Oregon. Those you don't feel like you're going to win anyway. But you got some pretty challenging road games as well. Nebraska, Rutgers, Northwestern. Those are not exactly easy games. They're projected to be an underdog in every one of those. So if you find yourself on the wrong side of a bunch of those coin flip games, it's going to be tough to get over 5.5 wins. The rating right now, I've got them nationally number 70. Conference rating is 16. Projected wins, I've got them at 5.37, so slightly under. I do have them a favorite projected in 5 games, and I've got them in 5 toss-up games. So we're going to see what this team looks like going forward. We'll move on to the Indiana Hoosiers. Current win total is 5.5 there. That's the same as the opener. You got odds of minus 138 to go over. That's 57.98% probability. And plus 112 to go under. That's 47.17%. Conference odds for Indiana are the same as Illinois, 200 to 1. That is 0.5% probability. For why they might go over, you got a bunch of experienced transfers. New coach Curt Cignetti brought in just a wave of talented players from James Madison. That includes the defensive end, Kamara. Indiana, look, they significantly upgraded their roster, which should make them more competitive across the board. They do have a manageable schedule. You look at this thing, you got 3 wins that should be shoe-ins, right? Or I think we call them gimme wins. So you got 3 gimme wins. Then you got a bunch of them that are just coin flips. I mean, this is one of the easiest that Indiana's had in years, right? You got winnable non-conference games, FIU, Western Illinois, Charlotte. You got to go to UCLA, but is that daunting, really? We'll see. And then, of course, you got proven coaching. Like, Cignetti has a track record of winning and winning quickly at multiple places. So that would lead you to assume that he could turn this Indiana team around, especially with the fact that he's got a bunch of key transfers that he is really, really familiar with. Now, for why they might go under, 31 new transfers, you might have some chemistry concerns, right? You got a new coaching staff as well, trying to develop the cohesiveness with this bunch, especially in the Big Ten. That's going to be rough. A lot of these incoming transfers, they are all unproven against the Power Five. You know, the quarterback, Curtis Rourke, comes from Ohio, hadn't really played a Big Ten type of schedule, right? So, but it's a lot of other guys like that as well. So you don't know what these guys are going to look like in the Big Ten, where competition is a little bit more difficult. I think that's maybe putting it mildly. And then, of course, there are defensive vulnerabilities. The front seven has seen some upgrades, but the secondary remains a concern. You got potential issues in pass coverage, and you're going to have to go up against some pretty strong Big Ten offenses, right? Their rating is number 82. Conference rating is number 18. So I've got them dead last in the conference. Projected wins 5.76, which is slightly over because of that schedule. And I've got 3 games as a projected favorite with 6 toss-up games. So there's certainly a better chance for them to go over than maybe, say, Illinois. But that's just because of the schedule, right? You got Michigan State, you got Washington, you got Purdue, you got Northwestern, Maryland. Like, these are winnable games. Even going on the road to UCLA, who I've got UCLA as a double-digit favorite. I don't feel great about that. Like, this is a good spot for Indiana here. Moving along, the Iowa Hawkeyes. Oh, yes. Current win total is 8.5. That's up from the 7.5 opener. Odds of plus 152 to go over. That's 39.68% probability. And minus 188. That is 65.28%. So the favorite here is the under 8.5. I can totally understand it. Odds to win the Big Ten, 40-1. That's an implied probability of 2.44%. I don't think we're going to worry about them winning the Big Ten, but could they get to the Big Ten title game? I mean, you look at the schedule and tell me. So as for why they might go over the 8.5, they do have an elite defense. It's going to be the oldest in all of FBS. I think the average age of their starters is 23. They get 11 of 14 key defenders returning. That includes, standout players like Black, Castro, Higgins, etc. Their defense is absolutely going to remain one of the best in the country. And so that in and of itself is going to set the stage for a pretty strong season, despite whatever offensive struggles they might have. Number 2, experience, right? Kirk Ferentz, he's going into his 26th year. He knows how to win close games. He prefers to win close games. They play old school, grinded out kind of football. He maximizes results, even with limited offensive output. 8 or more wins is absolutely attainable, right? And then number 3, you got a favorable schedule here. 2024 schedule, remarkably manageable. You got winnable games against weaker Big Ten opponents, and you're avoiding several of the conference's top teams, right? So you got a path here to be able to exceed expectations. Now, for why they might go under, offense, right? You brought in a new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester, and I like him, but it's a new offensive approach. I don't know that the roster necessarily fits what he wants to do yet, but the offense was abysmal last season, and years before that. We don't know whether or not Cade McNamara or Brendan Sullivan can elevate that side of the ball. I would maybe trust Sullivan more at this point because McNamara, you haven't heard good things out of camp. But regardless, you do have offensive line issues. That's a problem. Despite returning 4 starters, Iowa's offensive line was not great last year or even the year before. They haven't lived up to their historical standard, which is one of the best offensive lines in the country in quite some time. If they can't, help the running game, if they can't pass protect, it's going to be a problem. And then, of course, number 3, special teams decline. Like, you're losing your elite punter, Torrey Taylor. He was critical in helping flip field position last season. That could absolutely hurt Iowa's ability to control the games through defense and special teams, especially if whoever the replacement is does not measure up. I've got them rated nationally number 26. Conference rating is number 6. I've got them at 7.27 wins. So I've got them going under with 10 games as a projected favorite and 7 toss-up games. Toss-up games, by the way, are one-score games. So I'm seeing a lot of them on here. But the toughest game on the board is Ohio State. Outside of that, there's not a single game on here that they could not win. All of them, really. I've got 7 toss-ups. Really, all of them could be toss-ups. I've got Michigan State, Northwestern, Troy, and Illinois State as games that should be wins. But, I mean, you never know. You never know with this team. We carry on, and we move to the Maryland Terrapins. Current win total is 6.5. That's down from the 7.5 opener. Odds of plus 116 to go over. That's only 46.3% probability. Minus 142 to go under. That's 58.68%. Conference odds plus 12,000. That's 120 to 1. That is 0.83% probability. Now, for why they might go over, experience coaching, defensive continuity. You got Brian Williams entering his 3rd year as defensive coordinator. Maryland's defense improved from 46th to 11th in defensive SP+. And it should continue to be a strength, right? So long as they do that, they've got a solid foundation. They should be able to compete in basically every game on the schedule. Again, who would have thought Maryland and defense would be what you're looking at? And I don't know if that had to do with how bad the Big Ten offenses were last year. That's something to pay attention to. Schedule, soft early schedule. Maryland does avoid Ohio State and Michigan. And they face a manageable early schedule. You got winnable games against teams like Virginia and Indiana, and those are both on the road. But your home games, UConn, Michigan State, Villanova, those should be wins. You could build up a little bit of momentum heading into that bye week. Then on the backside, you get Northwestern at home, you get USC at home, and then you got to play at Minnesota. All of those are winnable games. So, not totally crazy. You do have talented skill positions, right? Despite losing Baby Tua, Talia Tagovailoa, Maryland does return key playmakers in, the wide receiver Caden Prather. You got Ty Felton. You got running back Roman Himby. There's a lot of talent here. And, so long as you can get them the ball, it should be a dynamic offense that can surprise opponents, right? So we'll see if it's MJ Morris or Billy Edwards and which one of those can actually step up here. As for why they might go under, quarterback uncertainty, as I just mentioned, Baby Tua is gone. So there's unproven options at quarterback. MJ Morris didn't look great at NC State and then decided he didn't want to play anymore after 4 games. Billy Edwards Jr., not exactly a passer. I mean, these guys are pretty limited as far as the efficiency goes. So, this could be a concern. The offensive line is rebuilt, right? Maryland's offensive line, it turns only 2 part-time starters. That's a significant rebuild here. You got 3 key linemen that are now in the NFL. I mean, this unit could absolutely struggle to protect the quarterback, and even open up running lanes for the offense. So, and then of course, as easy as the beginning of the schedule is, the late season schedule is pretty brutal, right? It's a relatively soft start. But then you get to that middle part, you got USC, then you got to go at Minnesota, which both are winnable, but still, the last 4 games of the schedule, at Oregon, Rutgers at home, Iowa at home, at Penn State. I think if you go 1-3 in those spots, you're feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good about yourself. So, I've got them nationally rated number 44. Conference rating is number 11. I've got them at 6.47 wins, so I've got them slightly under 8 games as a favorite, or a projected favorite, and 7 toss-up games. So 7 one-score games here. A lot of coin flips. A lot of coin flips to pay attention to on this bunch. All right. That's not what we want. That's what we want. Yes. The Michigan Wolverines. Current win total is 8.5. This thing opened at 9.5. It's dropped a full win. You got odds of minus 162 to go over. That's 61.83% implied probability. That is certainly the favorite here. So Vegas, or the sports books, are expecting an over here. They're expecting at least 9 wins. And then, of course, plus 132 to go under. That is 43.10% probability. Conference odds are plus 850. That is 10.53% chance to win the Big Ten. Now, for why they might go over their 8.5 win total, you got an elite defensive core. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. They're going to anchor a defense that could be better than last year. I don't know how that would be statistically possible, but as far as playing, yeah, that bunch could absolutely be awesome. Their front seven is set up to be able to dominate. If they do that, Wolverines are going to have a strong chance to shut down even the best offenses on this schedule. Speaking of the schedule, of course, it is a favorable schedule, right? Or at least as far as timing is concerned. Michigan's toughest games, that includes matchups against Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. Those all come later in the season. That allows the team to gel a little bit. Texas doesn't come later in the season. That's week 2. But you do have a workout game ahead of that one. So that certainly helps out. But that's going to allow the team to gel a little bit, work through some of this early season growing pains before they face elite competition. And then number 3, you got dynamic playmakers on offense. Yeah, you did lose some key offensive players, but you still got Donovan Edwards back there. You got Colston Loveland back there. All of them could thrive with an expanded role, and that would give you enough firepower to be able to push past this 8.5 win total. As for why they might go under, you got an inexperienced coaching staff, right? Sharon Moore takes over as head coach. First time. Kirk Campbell is the new offensive coordinator. There's significant uncertainty in leadership, and that could lead to struggles in some pretty high-pressure situations against top-tier opponents. It helps that Sharon Moore coached some of these games last year, but he was not there he was there, but he was not the lead dog when it came to game planning, etc. Everything was basically set up for him once you get to game day. So Jim Harbaugh, despite being suspended, was still allowed to coach the team during the week. So this was not Sharon Moore's program yet. Number 2, you got a quarterback uncertainty. J.J. McCarthy, that is a major void at quarterback. You got Alex Orji, you got Jack Tuttle, and I forget the other guy's name, and I should have put it in my notes because it looks like he's beating out Tuttle, at least for the backup role. We don't know yet whether or not he might start over Orji, but I would imagine Orji's going to get the start. But again, uncertainty. It's not like Orji has been great at throwing the football. And then you have an offensive line rebuild, right? This was a massive strength, and they return 0 starters from last year. There's a lack of continuity, lack of experience. We'll see what they look like. Because can you establish a dominant run game if your offensive line is not great? And the answer is no, obviously. And so their rating, I've got them rated number 8 in the country, but I've got them rated number 4 in the conference. Projected wins, I've got them at 8.93, so slightly over the 8.5. I've got them a projected favorite in 9 games. And I've got them in 4 toss-ups. Toss-ups, Texas, Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State. Now, the Washington one, it's only a toss-up because it's on the road, and it's the week after you're playing, 2 weeks after you play USC and the week after you play Minnesota, and that could be one of those kind of bruise-it type of games. So, carrying on, we move to the Michigan State Spartans. Current win total is 4.5. The opener was 5.5, so it's moved down an entire game. Odds of minus 154 to go over. That's 60.63%. That is the favorite. And plus 126 to go under. That's 44.25% probability. Conference odds are plus 25,000. That's 250 to 1. That is 0.40% chance of them winning the Big Ten. Now, for why they might go over, you got defensive potential here. Revamped secondary. You got proven talents like UCF's Martinez. You got Arizona State's Ed Woods. You pair that with a strong front seven, bolstered by some more key transfers. And the Spartans' defense under Joe Rossi, the former Minnesota defense coordinator, could actually be formidable in year 1, right? And if they can do that, they're going to be competitive in a lot of games. Number 2, Jonathan Smith, new head coach. He's a rebuilding machine, at least from what he did at Oregon State. But it took a little while at Oregon State. He's got a very disciplined approach, very methodical. He's going to build this up the right way. Maybe it helps them exceed expectations pretty quickly, especially because they did bring in quite a bit of talent. I don't know that it's as much as everybody else on the schedule, but, they've got experienced quarterback options. They got some pretty dynamic offensive weapons. You never know. And then you do have a favorable schedule stretch, right? While the early and midseason games pose challenges, the back half of this schedule, I mean, you got some winnable games here. You got Indiana at home, Illinois on the road, Purdue at home, Rutgers at home. You could certainly end with some momentum heading into next season. If you're able to get 3 out of those 4, get you an FAU, a Louisiana, and then 3 of the last 4. I mean, you're feeling pretty good about yourself at that point. So in the middle of the schedule, though, Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, that is rough. Now, as for why they might go under their total, offensive line issues, right? You only got one offensive line returning with any kind of experience. Depth is a major concern here. So, again, you got to be able to protect the quarterback. You got to be able to establish a ground game here. It's going to be a bit of an issue. Quarterback uncertainty, right? Aiden Childs is your quarterback. Tommy Schuster comes in. Neither quarterback has proven themselves at the Big Ten level or really at any level. And the lack of offensive cohesion, I mean, that could be a big issue. Turnovers, stalling drives, all that kind of stuff. It all depends on what these quarterbacks end up looking like. And then, of course, rebuild growing pains, right? You got a new coaching staff. You get significant roster overhaul. You got the loss of some key defensive players. This could be the prototypical transitional year if you get some inconsistent performances. So it may be tough to get over that 4.5. Nationally, I've got them rated number 78. Conference rating, I've got number 17. Projected wins are 4.58. That is a slight over here with 3 games as a projected favorite and then 7 one-score toss-up games. So that is something to pay attention to because there are plenty of coin flip games here. All right, we move on to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Current win total is 5.5. It opened at 4.5, so there has been a little bit of love in the market for the Golden Gophers. Odds of -102 to go over. That's 50.50% probability, and -120 to go under. That is 54.55% probability to go under. That would be the favorite here. Conference odds, 250 to 1. That's 0.4%, exactly what we just talked about with Michigan State. Now, as far as why Minnesota might go over their win total, we think the defense is ready to rebound, right? Yeah, you lost Joe Rossi, but, I mean, they returned 14 key defenders. That includes a standout linebacking core. You got disruptive ends like Danny Strigo and Ja Joyner. Like, this defense is capable of keeping Minnesota in almost every game that they play. You got a revamped offense. You bring in the veteran quarterback Max Brosmer. You got a deep, powerful running back room with Taylor there leading the way. I mean, the Gophers' offense could take a pretty significant step forward, especially if Brosmer adapts to Big Ten play pretty quick and maximizes those that are around him. And then, of course, you got a favorable schedule. You avoid Ohio State. You avoid Oregon. That's a big win, right? And you got several winnable games against pretty evenly matched opponents. Minnesota's got a pretty clear path to 6 or more wins if they can capitalize on those opportunities. Now, as far as why they might go under, as much as we talked about Max Brosmer, you do have a bit of offensive uncertainty here. If he doesn't live up to expectations or if he gets injured, that offense could remain stagnant, right? Even though you got Taylor back there. Taylor's another one. If he gets injured, what does that running back room look like? You got inexperience in key positions. Secondary, wide receiver core, those are all unproven. You got new starters at the positions. If they don't perform at a pretty high level, I mean, it could be an issue, okay? Especially with explosive plays on both sides of the ball. You might not be able to generate them. You might not be able to stop them. So it could lead to some pretty costly mistakes in tight games. And when you got as many toss-ups as they do, you got 6 of them here, it could cost you games. All right, you got tough conference matchups. Yeah, you avoid the top teams, but you still got Michigan on the schedule, USC, Penn State. You got what we think is going to be an improved Wisconsin team at the end of the year. Might be a bit of an issue. Their rating is number 58 nationally. The conference rating is number 13. Projected wins, I've got them at 5.3, so I'm slightly under the 5.5. I've got 2 games as a projected favorite, and that's it, which is pretty nuts, and 6 toss-up games. So I'm not super high on Minnesota this year, but I mean, if they got to 6 wins, would it surprise anybody? PJ Fleck has done more with less, or less with more. Either way, you guys get the point. I think you guys get the point, but we'll see. Carrying on, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Current win total is 7.5. That one has not moved. Odds of -122 to go over. That's the favorite here. Probability of 54.95%, and an even +100 to go under. That's right, 50%. Conference odds, 50-1. That is 1.96% probability of winning the Big Ten. Now, for why they might go over, youthful talent injection, right? You got 5-star quarterback Dylan Raiola. You got a crop of highly touted freshmen. There's certainly the potential here for some explosive improvement on offense, especially if Raiola can adapt to the Big Ten pretty quickly. Matt Rule's track record is number 2 here. Rule has a history of pretty rapid turnarounds. He has built winning programs at Temple and Baylor, and you know those are 2 pretty difficult jobs. Nebraska's got a favorable early schedule. He could guide them to a quick start. If you got momentum, once you get into the back half of that schedule, some of those games become even more winnable. So, something to pay attention to. They got a stout defense, right? Tony White's 33-5 defense. I mean, it was top 10 in a bunch of different categories last season. They returned some key players like Hutmacher, however you say it, and Tommy Hill as well. It's going to give Nebraska a pretty strong foundation here. If they can control some of these games with their defense, the offense doesn't have to be the best thing on the field, right? Now, for why they might not go over their win total, inexperienced quarterback. Depending on a true freshman quarterback, no matter how talented Raiola is, there's going to be some growing pains. So struggling in some of these tight contests might make it where they don't get over that 7.5. You got offensive coordinator concerns. Marcus Satterfield, he's had issues with production, and there's a lot of people that doubt him. He's got a better quarterback now than he's had in a while. He did have Spencer Rattler at South Carolina, but even still, there's promising reports from spring practice, but it's almost one of those situations where you're going to have to see it to believe it, right? And then you got a tough closing stretch. You got a potentially strong start here, but the final 5 games are all against top 30 opponents. You got UCLA, you got Ohio State, you got USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. Those are all difficult games, all very losable spots. So, again, it might be tough to get over that 7.5 here. I've got them rated number 36. Conference rating is actually number 9. And projected wins, I've got them at 6.67. So I've got them almost a full win under the 7.5. A lot of that has to do with, one, they're favored in 9 games, but they've got 8 toss-up games. So 8 one-score games are expected out of this bunch. Going to flip that over. And now we go to the Northwestern Wildcats. Current win total is 4.5, opened at 5.5, so it's down a full win. Odds of -122 to go over. That's the favorite here, 54.95% probability, and an even 100 to go under. That's 50%. Conference odds are 400-1. That's plus 40,000 with an implied probability of 0.25%. Now, for why they might go over their win total, the defense certainly should carry the load with Braun's team, right? 14 returning defenders. That includes leaders like Mueller and Hubbard. The Wildcats' defense should absolutely be a disruptive force. And if they can do that, they can keep some of these games close, and they might be able to find a way to grind out some wins. You do have experienced leadership. David Braun proved last year that he's pretty good. Led them to an 8-5 record, and it was under extremely challenging circumstances. But now you got a full offseason to prepare. He's brought in his guys. We'll see what that looks like. And then, of course, a favorable early schedule. Their first 3 games are against Miami of Ohio, Duke, and Eastern Illinois. And then you got Washington on the road. And Washington, with 21 out of 22 new starters, I mean, that is banana. Who knows what to expect out of them? But you start off with 3 winnable games that you're favored in. You build some early momentum, and then just see where the chips land. That's what we're going to do. So, as for why they might not go over their win total, inconsistent quarterback play. There's not a single proven quarterback out of the bunch. You got Helinski, you got Mike Wright, you got Jack Lausch. They might struggle to find some stability on offense, right? And if you can't do that, I mean, it's going to be real difficult to win some of these games. Offensive challenges, right? Zach Lujan, he's the new offensive coordinator, comes in from South Dakota State. You got to revamp an offense that lacks talent, that lacks size, and he had all of those things at South Dakota State. You got a shaky offensive line here, and even with some of the talented running backs like Cam Porter, it might be tough for them to find some traction here if the offensive line isn't working right. So, regression from 2023 success. Northwestern had a favorable schedule in 2023. There was a bit of luck in some of those close games last year. There's a a tougher slate this go round. The loss of that underdog surprise factor, right? People are going to be paying attention now because a lot of teams lost to Northwestern last year that are going to be playing them again. So, and the turnover thing, I think they were plus 10 or plus 13 in turnover margin last year. We'll see if that continues to hold. I've got them rated number 59. Conference rating is number 14. Projected wins, I've got them at 4.98, so slightly over the 4.5. 5 games as a projected favorite, but 8 toss-up games. So you got a bunch of coin flip games there that you're going to have to pay attention to. Tickets to everything are expensive these days, and I know you're like me. You want to catch a big game or a concert, maybe even tickets to a show. Why not save some money every time you buy tickets? Visit TicketSmarter.com or use the TicketSmarter mobile app and use the promo code WCE10, that's WCE10, to save $10 on any order of $100 or more, or use WCE20, that's WCE20, to save $20 on an order of $300 or more. It's not a one-time sign-up bonus or anything. Seriously, every time you buy tickets, you can save money on already great deals. So do yourself a favor. Think smarter with TicketSmarter. The Ohio State Buckeyes are next. Current win total is 10.5. That is the same as the opener. Odds of minus 150 to go over. That's 60% probability. And plus 120 to go under. That is 45.45% probability. Conference odds, plus 150. So a 40% chance to win the Big Ten. They are the favorite here. Now, as for why Ohio State might go over their win total, elite defense, right? You got 10 out of 14 key defenders coming back under Jim Knowles. It's his third year there. Jim Knowles has improved defenses every single season for like 9 years. I mean, it's something crazy. They got a top-tier defense that's going to dominate most of their schedule. I mean, you see the schedule on the screen there. And as long as you got a good defense, that's a good foundation for a championship caliber season. As far as the other ones, they got a dynamic backfield, right? Other reasons why they might go over. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, that is an incredibly potent 1-2 punch, right? You got a consistent and explosive running game. You're going to be able to control the tempo there. You also have experienced leadership, right? Ryan Day is 56-8 as head coach, and he brings in Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. You got a wealth of experience on the sidelines, along with Jim Knowles, who I mentioned before. But they can rebound and compete at the absolute highest level here. Now, as for why they might go under their win total, you got a little bit of quarterback uncertainty, right? Will Howard certainly has experience, but he's not the best passer known to man. And that could certainly limit explosiveness, right, against top-tier defenses. You got offensive line concerns. Yeah, they got 4 starters back, but the line struggled last season. You bring in Seth McLaughlin, who was at Alabama. He had snapping issues there. We'll see if it solidifies the unit. Who knows? There's mounting pressure to win, right? 3 straight losses to Michigan. You got a pretty demanding schedule. You got tough road games at Oregon, at Penn State. And then you got Michigan at the end of the year. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Ryan Day. Who knows what expectations can do to a team, right? I've got them rated number 3 in the country. Conference rating is number 2. We'll talk about the next team in a minute. But I've got them projected at 10.4 wins. So I've got them slightly under, but 11 games as a projected favorite and 3 toss-ups. I got the Michigan game as a toss-up because I've only got them favored by 7.97. So for it to be considered a guaranteed win, here, get in the camera, guaranteed, I need them to be favored by more than 8. So right now I've got them maybe almost a half-point favorite at Penn State. I got them a 3-point dog at Oregon. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Ohio State. Next up, the Oregon Ducks. Current win total, 10.5. Same as Ohio State, same as the opener. Odds of minus 110 to go over, 110 to go under. Those are both 52.38% probability to win the Big Ten, plus 220. That's implied probability of 31.25%. Now, why Oregon might go over their win total? Explosive offense, right? You bring Dylan Gabriel in under center. He has been a college quarterback for what feels like a decade at this point, but you got a deep, talented receiver room. You got plenty of firepower on offense. I mean, you got Jordan James, you got Evan Stewart leading the charge. We'll see what Evan Stewart looks like. He wasn't able to really we'll say, get after it at Texas A&M. He's certainly going to be put in a position to here in Eugene. Defensive upgrades, Dan Lanning has significantly bolstered the defense. And top-tier transfers, you got a bunch of returning talent. They're going to have a unit that is more than capable of competing and probably dominating in the Big Ten. And then you got a favorable schedule. I mean, look at this thing. And you got tough road games at Michigan, at Wisconsin. You get Ohio State at home. Other than that, I mean, this sets up really, really well. It is more than manageable. We'll see what they do. Now, for why they might not go over their win total, you do have some depth concerns on defense, right? Starting lineup is certainly solid, but the defensive front maybe lacks a little bit of proven depth, which could be exposed in the Big Ten, especially if they end up with some injuries, right? And then, of course, there's the transition to the Big Ten. Jumping from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, it's a different level of competition. And that's not to say that the Pac-12 was bad. It's just different, right? The Big Ten is a much more physical style of play. And you start looking at some of these late road games at Michigan, at Wisconsin. Yeah, I mean, those games can get kind of tough. And then, of course, you've got expectations. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. Like Phil Knight has instilled a championship or bust mentality, and there's a huge reliance on transfers here. So the pressure on Dan Lanning to deliver, I mean, you never know what's going to happen in some of these critical games, right? Especially you've got a new quarterback under center. You got transfers in at key positions. It's going to be very interesting to see. As far as the talent and whatnot, I've got them power rated number 2 in the country. Conference rating, I've got them number 1. Projected wins, I've got them at 10.49, so 0.01 under the 10.5 here. I've got them a favorite in all 12 games. I've only got 2 toss-up games at Michigan and then Ohio State at home. Very interesting. I'm curious to see what this Oregon team is going to look like. All right, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Current win total is 9.5. That is the same as the opener. Odds of -172 to go over. That is 63.24% probability. And +140 to go under. That is 41.67%. And now conference odds are +450. That is 18.18% chance to win the Big Ten. Now, for why they might go over, they do have explosive potential, right? Drew Aller, probably poised to take some more risks under, and he's got a cannon arm. We all know that. But under the new offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, I think the Penn State offense is finally going to generate some big plays that have been missing, right? They've got a powerful running game. Not that Allen and Singleton were great last year, but I think that we know what they are as far as running the football. I think they can certainly open up the explosive part of the passing game. They've got a stingy defense, right? You got some departures, but you bring in Tom Allen, former Indiana head coach and also former Indiana defensive coordinator. He is the new DC here. He inherits a defense that was, for all intents and purposes, top tier last season. They keep Abdul Carter. They got Kobe King still there. Like, Penn State's going to remain one of the toughest teams to score on in the entire Big Ten. And they've got an insanely favorable schedule, right? Michigan is off the regular season schedule. Ohio State visits Happy Valley. They are in a spot here. I think they can navigate this schedule pretty easily. Like, I think they can set up an 11-win season. So, as for why they might go under, the offensive line is a question, right? You lost 3 NFL caliber linemen. There's some concerns about protecting Drew Aller, right? And then whether or not there's going to be running lanes for Allen and Singleton, who weren't great after the tackle or after contact last year. So, we'll see exactly what that means for the offense's effectiveness. There's inexperience at wide receiver, right? You've got a lack of proven playmakers there. It could stifle the passing game. It could make it harder for Aller to capitalize on his arm. I mean, you got Julian Fleming, but he's a transfer coming in. He does have experience, but we'll see what that looks like because the playmakers, we haven't really seen them make plays. We'll say that. And then there's a potential for defensive regression, right? Defensive line depth, potential issues in the secondary maybe. That could lead to a drop from last year's, elite defensive performance. So if they can't do that, it's going to be tougher to control games, etc. I've got them power rated number 6 in the country. Conference rating is number 3. I've got projected wins at 9.98, so over the 9.5. 11 games as a projected favorite and 2 toss-up games. Next on the board, we have got the Purdue Boilermakers. Yes. Current win total 4.5. That is the same as the opener. It hadn't moved. Odds of plus 142 to go over. That's 41.32% probability. And minus 178 to go under. That is 64.03% probability there to win the conference. 400 to 1. That is an implied probability of 0.25%. Purdue is not going to win the Big Ten. I could almost guarantee that. Now, as for why they might go over their win total, year 2 bump, right? Ryan Walters coming into his second year. The more settled roster here, they could benefit from a typical year 2 bump, particularly with a returning quarterback, right? You got Hudson Card back, and he has shown flashes, certainly. We'll see what he looks like this year because he's missing one of his dynamic playmakers there. Solid ground game, of course. You got 4 returning starters on the offensive line. You got a proven backfield led by Devin Mockabee, and you got the transfer coming in, Reggie Love III. Purdue's running game has the potential to, control the clock, keep games within reach, etc. And then there's defensive potential. Right? Ryan Walters knows what he's doing with the defense. Yeah, you got a few losses here and there, but the defense still has standout players like Jenkins and Thieneman. You got a chance to lean on a pretty solid defensive core going into this season. Now, for why they might go under, inexperience at receiver, right? Receiving core is almost completely new, and there's talent there, but the lack of proven production, that could be an issue for Hudson Card, right? So we'll see what that ends up looking like. They've got a pretty tough schedule. I mean, you got Notre Dame in week 2, and then you play at Oregon State in week 3. Nebraska comes in right after. I mean, it is brutal to start, and then it ain't much easier on the back end, right? Once you get through Notre Dame, Oregon State, Nebraska, you got to go to Wisconsin. Then you got to go to Illinois. Then Oregon comes in. You got a bye week. You get Northwestern at home. Probably should win that, maybe. But then you got Ohio, at Ohio State. Penn State comes in. You get to close with games against Michigan State and Indiana, but they're both on the road. It's tough to find winnable games here. I mean, there's a few coin flip games, but good gracious. Depth concerns are certainly an issue. You got a heavy reliance on transfers and, young incoming players. You deal with injuries or any kind of unexpected underperformance that could expose a lack of depth, right? Particularly on the defensive line and the secondary. That would lead to, potential struggles in some close games. I've got them power rated number 61. Conference rating is number 15. Projected wins, though, I've got them at 4.58. So that is slightly over with 4 games as a projected favorite and 6 toss-up games. So I'm curious about Ryan Walters in year 2 here. Curious about that. All right, still got a few more, but I'm recording this on Friday of week 1. We got to get these previews out. I've had them done for a while. Current win total for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Yes. Current win total is 6. That is down from the 6.5 opener. Odds of minus 140 to go under. Minus 140 to go over. 58.33% probability there. And plus 120 to go under. That's 45.45%. It's 120 to 1 to win the Big Ten. That is 0.83% probability. Now, for why they might go over, returning production, right? Rutgers is number 13 nationally in returning production, according to Bill Conley. They bring back a pretty cohesive and experienced group on both sides of the ball. That leads to that is continuity, that is stability, especially on defense. You know what Greg Schiano likes to do. The defense is the backbone. You get a strong secondary. Flip Dixon, of course, Loyal. The defense ranked 19th in SP Plus last year. They can lean on this, kind of bend but don't break unit. I'm curious. I'm curious about it. And then, of course, a favorable schedule. That's the biggest thing. They avoid Ohio State. They avoid Michigan. They avoid Oregon. They avoid Penn State. I mean, you got winnable games against Virginia Tech and Minnesota. I mean, there's a chance they could really get past this win total, big time. Now, as for why they might go under, offensive questions, right? The offense is certainly a concern. You got a new quarterback in Ethan Kaliak-Menes. He's yet to prove that he can consistently produce at a high level in the Big Ten, and that could lead to struggles in moving the ball and scoring points, right? There are defensive line concerns, right? You got a strong secondary here, but the defensive front's lack of size and really their poor performance last year in rush defense. I mean, they were 124th in rushing success rate allowed. That might prevent Rutgers from controlling the line of scrimmage, leaves them vulnerable against some more physical teams, etc. And there are certainly physical teams on the schedule. You got Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota in here, Michigan State at the end of the year. That those are teams that are certainly going to try and get rough with you. And then there's tough road games, right? The schedule's favorable, but you got challenging road games at Virginia Tech. USC is on the road. And then you got tricky matchups against teams like Nebraska and Illinois that if you don't get those wins, especially early, we'll see what happens. I've got them power rated number 49. Conference rating is number 12. Projected wins, I've got them at 6.48. So I've got them going over the 6. But I've got 5 projected favorites, 5 games where they are a projected favorite. And then I got 9 toss-ups. You got 9 coin flip games right there. Just, it's going to be interesting. Rutgers is a team that is certainly set up for success, but it could go haywire quickly. The UCLA Bruins, current win total 4.5. That's down from the 5.5 opener, which it makes perfect sense. Chip Kelly left late. They hired in Foster, and then of course Foster didn't exactly look great. He didn't instill a lot of confidence in bettors at Big Ten Media Days over the summer. We'll say that. But odds of minus 144 to go over. That is 59.02% probability. That is the favorite here. Plus 118 to go under. That is 45.87% probability on that. Conference odds are 150 to 1. That's 0.66% chance to win the Big Ten. Why UCLA might go over their win total? They do have an experienced offense. Ethan Garbers returns. He leads an offense that returns a pretty solid core, right? You got a veteran offensive line. You got explosive backs like TJ Harden. UCLA's offense could certainly thrive under Eric Bieniemy's leadership. And yes, Eric Bieniemy from the NFL is now the new offensive coordinator. It makes them interesting, if nothing else, right? There is defensive depth. They retained 9 key defensive players from a unit that steadily improved and then ended up number 11 in defense last year. That's a pretty solid foundation. You got transfers like KJ Wallace, Brian Addison that are going to bolster the secondary. But we'll talk about why they might go under here in a minute. And there's the energy boost, right? Deshaun Foster and Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, it brought some energy into that program. There's some enthusiasm there. The roster certainly likes the hire. Like, they were excited about it. So that could certainly lead them to go over this 4.5. Now, for why they might go under, the coaching transition, right? Chip Kelly is an experienced head coach, successful head coach, knows what he's doing. And now you're going to a first-time head coach, a guy that has never done this before, in Deshaun Foster. So there's going to be some uncertainty there, right? Foster needs to prove that he can manage the program effectively, and this is a really difficult schedule to be able to do that against. For another reason why they might go under, key losses on defense, right? Latu and Gabrielle Murphy, they were critical to UCLA's defensive success last year. That's pretty big gaps. Yeah, they bring back 9 key guys, or 9 returning starters, whatever. How about this? 9 returning players that have experience there. But there's gaps in that pass rush. And you don't know if they're going to be able to be filled in by incoming transfers or some of the recruits that came in. They've got a grueling travel schedule, right? You got games at LSU, at Penn State, at Washington. I mean, that is at Nebraska. It's going to be challenging to string together enough wins to get past this total. I'm interested, right? At LSU, that 3-game stretch right there in the first 5 games, you play at Hawaii, you got a bye week, you host Indiana, then you got to go all the way to Baton Rouge. Yes, I have to say it like that. I don't know why. Baton Rouge. Then you host Oregon at home, and then you got to play at Penn State. You host Minnesota. You go all the way over to Rutgers. You got a bye week. You go all the way to Nebraska. Iowa at home. There's no getting comfortable here. It's just back, forth. All right, so I've got them power rated number 33, which I was a little surprised at. I felt like that was a little bit high. But the conference rating, I've got them at number 7. Projected wins, 5.98. So I've certainly got them going over. But 6 games as a projected favorite, 5 toss-up games. I don't feel great about my numbers on this. I don't think UCLA is going to be that good, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, I've been wrong before, and I'll certainly be wrong again. The USC Trojans, current win total is 7.5. That is also the same as the opener, hadn't moved. Odds of minus 105 to go over. That's 51.22% probability, and minus 115 to go under. So the under, surprisingly, the favorite here, 53.49% probability on that. Conference odds 20 to 1 to win the Big Ten. That's 4.76% probability. Now, for why they might go over, Lincoln Riley. They got offensive firepower, right? Yeah, even with a new quarterback in Miller Moss, they are loaded with skill talent. Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, etc. They're going to be a threat to score a lot of points against pretty much everybody on the schedule. There are coaching updates, or upgrades, I guess. The hiring of D'Anton Lynn as defensive coordinator, like he completely turned around UCLA's defense. If he can do that at UCLA, he's got better talent at USC. They haven't been very competent on defense, but I think that he could make them more confident for sure. They had key additions from the transfer portal, especially on defense, right? Bear Alexander came in last year, Kamari Ramsey. They could provide a boost, certainly, that they need, especially in a conference like this. As for why they might go under, it's a pretty daunting schedule, right? Like, this is one of the most challenging schedules in the country. You got matchups against LSU to open up with, at Michigan, Notre Dame at the end of the year. And then in the middle, I mean, you still got to deal with Penn State. You got Rutgers at Washington, Nebraska. There's difficult games here. Certainly difficult games if they're not firing on all cylinders. While we talked good about the new defensive hires, they did bring in Matt Entz as well, North Dakota State head coach. He's going to be a linebacker coach here. There's been an influx of defensive talent, but there's a lack of depth. There's a lack of size on that defensive line. And in this conference, you're going to need that. I mean, like I said, the Big Ten is physical. So you're going to have the bodies to be able to go through that. There are coaching transition risks, right? Like D'Anton Lynn, I talked about that. Rapid turnover in defensive leadership. You're bringing in new transfers, new players. It could lead to some inconsistencies, right? So they might not reach their full potential, but who knows? I've got them power rated number 20. Conference rating is number 5. But projected wins, I've got them at 6.82, so I've got them a little bit under, which goes to show exactly how important a schedule is. But I've got them 8 games as a projected favorite and 9 toss-up games. So we'll see. I'm a little bullish on USC. I think Lincoln Riley is not going to let this thing completely fall back. But, I mean, it wouldn't take much for this program to go 7-5, right? And I don't think that would be awful against this schedule, but good gracious. All right. The Washington Huskies. Current win total is 6.5. That's down from the 7.5 opener. Odds of plus 104 to go over. That is 49.02% probability. And minus 132. That is the favorite here to go under that win total. Implied probability there is 56.90%. Conference odds are plus 10,000. It's 100-1. That is 0.99% probability on that. Now, for why they might go over, yes, there is proven offensive talent, right? Will Rogers comes in at quarterback. He's got over 40 career starts, over 12,000 passing yards in the SEC. Now, that was all at Mississippi State, but you get the point. The offense, I imagine, it's going to have the tools to remain competent despite losing every single starter from last season. If Jed Fish and Pete Carroll's son, Brennan Carroll, who is the new offensive coordinator, if they can, quickly integrate these guys, Washington's offense could surprise. They do have a dynamic rushing attack. Jonah Coleman, he's an elite running back. He excelled at Arizona, and he followed Fish over there. And then you got the promising true freshman, Muhammad, right? Adam Muhammad. The Huskies have got a potent ground game, at least by the players. So if they've got that, that's certainly something to lean back on if there's not a bunch of chemistry between Rogers and the new skill guys, right? They do have a pretty solid defensive foundation. Defensive line has question marks. The whole team has question marks. But you got experienced guys back. Tuputala, I think is the guy's name, Alfonso Tuputala. And you got savvy transfers coming to Isaiah Ward, Ephesians Prysock. The defense has a chance to be better than what we think, especially with Steve Belichick as the defensive coordinator. Now, for why they might go under, massive inexperience in this system. You got 0 returning offensive starters on Washington's team. You got minimal depth on the offensive line. There are certainly challenges in building some consistency here that could lead to struggles against, this Big Ten schedule. The defensive line has a lack of proven depth and size, right? Like we've talked about this with numerous teams, but they're not overly big. They're not. It's a little scary. I don't know that they've got the bodies to be able to go through a Big Ten schedule. They could get overwhelmed. I'll say that. And then it's a brutal travel schedule, right? 4 trips across the country in 41 days. That includes games in the Eastern time zone and the Midwest. There's going to be logistical challenges, right? The schedule could lead to some fatigue. There's no telling what it might do. What it might do to this team. I've got them power rated number 37. The conference rating, I've got them number 10, so that's better than nothing. 6.41 wins, so I've got them slightly under with 7 games as a projected favorite and 8 toss-up games. But, you look at the schedule. Yeah, starting off, Weber State, Eastern Michigan, Washington State on a neutral, which Washington State's they would love to get that win. You host Northwestern. You play at Rutgers. That's going to be kind of difficult. But then Michigan, Iowa, a rebuilt Indiana, USC, Penn State, UCLA, and Oregon. That back half of that schedule is brutal. Brutal for that bunch. All right, and then we'll close out with this. The Wisconsin Badgers. Current win total, 6.5, same as the opener. Odds of minus 144 to go over. That's 59.02% probability, and plus 118 to go under. So the over is certainly the favorite here. 45.87% probability to go under. Conference odds, so 50-1 to win the Big Ten. That's 1.96% probability. Why Wisconsin might go over their win total? Defensive stability, right? 11 key defenders are coming back. That includes the standout corners, Hallman and Fourqueen. They're poised to remain a top-tier unit under Mike Tressel. The secondary is super experienced. You got the addition of mid-major star Delancey. He could be a backbone of that defense. You got a good defense, you can stay in some games. I'll say that. They should have an improved offensive line. The offense did struggle last season, but Luke Fickell has talked about the offensive line quite a bit, and that was the most significant area of growth in the offseason. So if the line lives up to its potential, it could certainly provide a more consistent offense here, especially with a healthy Ches Malusi. Tyler Van Dyke is going to be the starter here. He's got big play potential at quarterback, we think. He wasn't great last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And the portal additions, right? Wisconsin did pretty well in the transfer portal, especially at linebacker. They brought in Jaheim Thomas from Arkansas, Teteroa McMillan. They could fill in the gaps left by some departing players. If these newcomers adapt quickly, they could elevate the defense to an elite level. It gives the Badgers a chance to win some more games than what's projected. Now, for why they might go under, maybe a bit of an offensive identity crisis, right? Phil Longo came in, did the air raid offense. It wasn't great last year, but Tyler Van Dyke is coming in. He was inconsistent last year. The offense might be disjointed again, right? Moving from the traditional power run game to a pass-heavy scheme, that's challenging, right? Especially when you get into November and you got maybe some harsh weather conditions at Camp Randall. You look at what they're going to be doing in late October. You got Penn State at home, you got Oregon at home, you got Minnesota at home. That's rough to be able to throw the ball, especially in conditions that we expect in Madison. You got defensive line concerns, right? The defensive front, there's not a lot of depth there. Only James Thompson returns as a starter. You got key contributors that left in the portal. There's pretty big question marks here, especially against some pretty physical teams in the Big Ten, right? Again, we talk about the physical play in the Big Ten. And Wisconsin's got a brutal schedule. It's just, you got games against Alabama, USC, Oregon's down there, Iowa, Penn State in the middle. This is a brutal schedule. Even the perceived easier matchups, right? Rutgers, and Nebraska, those are tricky road games that could end up being losses, right? So this gauntlet, it makes getting to 7 wins pretty difficult. They could be significantly improved and end up with a worse record than they did last year. I've got them power rated number 34. Conference rating is number 8. And so I've got projected wins at 6.48. That's slightly under. But I've got them a favorite in 6 games. And I've got 5 toss-up games here. All right, so let's get to the conference title. Who's going to make the conference title game? I'm calling for a matchup that we are not going to see in the regular season. Give me Oregon and give me Penn State to make the Big Ten title game. I'm trying to go outside the box. I think the majority of people have bought into Oregon and Ohio State. But I could absolutely see Penn State getting there. Ohio State has to play in both Eugene and Happy Valley after some pretty difficult tests the week before with Iowa and Nebraska leading into those games. Yeah, Penn State makes sense. I think Oregon makes sense. But, man, if we saw a rematch of Penn State and Ohio State, I'd be fine with that too. All right, let's go and wrap this thing up. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and the podcast. And, of course, if you want to help the channel keep growing, you can become a member at bettingcfb.com. For winning cures everything. God bless college football, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks for listening to Winning Cures Everything. Make sure and follow me on Twitter at GaryWCE. If you want to toss in a question, you can email me, Gary@winningcureseverything.com. Make sure and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.